Hi, I'm Dean. So you're a part of the global consciousness shift paradigm, and you found your way to this video that's been made to help you through one little tiny step of that process, which is uh, much to do with gathering of information and learning from that information to help you unlock yourself and free yourself from this prison that you're in. That's essentially how I see a lot of what the ascension process and New Age 2012 stuff's about. I want to share a perspective with you guys. Really what's going on is a war on consciousness, or a war against our consciousness on the planet, and that seems to be the ultimate of whether things are won or lost, I guess, if you're looking at it in terms of a war or a battle. And unfortunately, I would say most of the world don't actually even know that they're conscious, which is a problem. So there are many people that have an awareness of their consciousness, or are aware that there is such thing as there's a higher consciousness over and above the lower consciousness, and a desire to help others, quote unquote, wake up to this, and that process itself, the waking up process, is very interesting, because it seems that there's a great deal of catalyzing agents in the world that have been put into place to help people realize why they need to wake up in the first place, such as the control system and the 3D reality. There's a lot of things that are used by let's call them light workers, to help show people that they've been tricked, and a great deal of that is in information and I guess learning that the control system will give false or biased information and claim that is the absolute truth, and most people fall for that, which is a required step. In order to wake up, you must first be asleep, which is an important concept to understand, because if we were born awake, we would probably have very little life experience and very little adventure, and very little learning. When you really start to think about it, it's why we start off in a human body without any memory of our prior incarnations or experiences as a soul or as a consciousness. So to learn is what we're here to do, and we're each here to learn different things as far as specific experiences go. However, the ultimate in learning is learning that you are not your body and mind, and understanding that these are tools, and also learning that your external world is a learning platform as well, where others learn and co-learn, for a shared objective of discovery, self-discovery. There's a lot of variations of this type of story, and how different teachings and so forth will work around this concept of learning. But ultimately, ultimately it's as simple as knowing that if you knew everything, you wouldn't need to be a human at this time in this place. Um, so it's kind of like relearning or understanding the self. Now, the gathering of information, which is what you're doing right now, because I'm sending out information in word form, in English, very distorted language, nasty stuff, nasty stuff. Yeah, we really should be communicating in pictograms and hieroglyphs and so forth. You know, there's just so much meaning that needs to be conveyed in communications in 3D, and a language such as English is just so distorted and so limited. It's a wonder we can even understand each other really at all. Now, these words exist in really one plane only, which is the 3D egoic mind type of situation. I realize what I just said is a slight contradiction, because the mind itself is not in the 3D material physical world as such, but is measured in there, such as brainwaves and electrical signals and stuff, which science thinks is our consciousness, and science seems to be bent on understanding this, and not really looking at uncovering what the underlying consciousness is, because it's not measurable in 3D. Science limits itself vastly with this type of attitude. So the work that I've been doing with myself and with others for the last couple of years really has been exploring this concept, and people such as David Wilcock have put together a bunch of scientific research which shows the science of consciousness, and I say sometimes to people that I used science to start understanding or uncovering this stuff. When I started out on my journey of self-discovery, Dean's journey, I called it. The statement was, I'm not searching for God, I'm searching for Dean. And in finding that, and what that means, I understood what Dean means, and I understood what God means. In finding that, I take a great deal of pleasure in helping others find this as well, which is kind of cool. It's really fun. It's exciting stuff to understand that you're not your mind is a very liberating understanding, I suppose. Struggle to find an English word for that one. Now, the gathering of information is a double-edged sword or blade. We require the information to, as I said earlier, to understand why we need to wake up. However, we can become extremely trapped within this endless loop of information gathering and understanding and trying to understand what it is that our consciousness is. And we cannot do this with our egoic mind. So stop trying, okay? You can really, really, really lose yourself in your mind if you keep trying to figure it out with your egoic mind. it's an incredibly limited logical place, and there's no place for consciousness in that realm at all. So I want to give an example of this. I've got a little booklet which is part of a religious science teaching, which I probably should say because it's copyrighted from its source, which is MCEO Freedom Teachings, Keylontic Science. And it starts off with, well, it doesn't really start off, but there is a principle to kind of live by. It's in two sections. It's the attitudes and responsibilities of mastery, and I'll read some of this off to you. Part of the process of spiritual integration of our higher selves, or expansion of our consciousness, involves reprogramming the way we think. Our thoughts create our reality and the life experience we have on the inside and the outside of us. The following attitudes and responsibilities, when embodied and lived, will help to change our thought patterns, thoughts that we simply take for granted because they are part of the programming we currently carry. Changing the thought patterns is actually changing the program in the personal template. Now, the 12 attitudes of mastery. Study the 12 attitudes of mastery. Make an affirmation meditation out of them, and try to make them your way of life. Now, we go through a list of 12 things here. I'll summarize the list. I won't go into the details of that. There's love, grace, gratitude, reverence or respect, responsibility, trust, accountability, impeccability, mindfulness, I love that word, fearlessness, engaged detachment, joy. These things are to be memorized in the egoic mind and understood. Now, in realizing that there's one line that I read here which said about the thought patterns changing the programming of the personal template. Let's look aside from that at the moment and just look at what's really going on here. We're taking 12 traits and as I said, memorizing them and understanding what they mean in our egoic mind at this one level, and programming our mind to think this way, which would be in conflict of the current programming that we would have in our mind, which is well, really dictated by our entire environment and our entire upbringing with our programming system. The thing is, we don't need to learn these things. We don't need to learn these things with our mind, with our egoic mind, because we already know them. These are the principles that exist already in your consciousness, our consciousness. If you were to deflate your egoic mind, if you were to have no words in your mind at all, and to have, I guess, accomplished overcoming of the ego and being your true self, each one of these 12 traits would be naturally already there. And it would be pretty much impossible. I would say absolutely impossible, actually, to veer from these principles at all, unless the egoic mind started to come back into play again. So this is an example of one of the tricks that we can get caught up in our personal development of our spiritual awakening or awareness. We can find ourselves putting more and more energy and attention into training our egoic mind to think a certain way, where the truth is it's actually a temporary mind anyway that goes with the body. This is not beneficial for the war on our consciousness. It's leaving our higher consciousness out of the equation and causing us to circle within a lower consciousness, and in doing so we find ourselves comparing our egoic knowledge with other people's egoic knowledge using words. So you know, you can find on communications and Facebook groups and that type of thing of people comparing their teachings, and you know, there's a good deal of this is the way that we should be doing this, and this is the way we should be doing that, and so forth. And all of this stuff only exists in the 3D egoic mind. When you raise above that and you are yourself, none of that matters, because it's everything already, you see. So the way I see it from the perspective that I have, because I'm not saying anything's right or wrong here, because it's still a very, very necessary thing to be learning. As I said a couple of times, you know, it is required. But it's only to be used, words and learnings, or words and teachings are only to be used to help you understand why you need to jump out of that trap. Take meditations, for example. Now, we can do a meditation, a visualization meditation, or mantras, or songs, or affirmations, and so forth. And we can go and sit down in a quiet room, and we can you know, visualize and say things to ourselves, and essentially recite. Excuse me a second. And essentially recite the words that we've learned, or the concepts that we've learned in our egoic mind, and repeat them while in a meditative state. Now, this can be useful on a certain level for things such as shielding and grounding techniques. However, any time that you're accessing this part of your mind, you are fixed in a lower vibrational consciousness state, which limits you to accessing only the data which is in your brain, the electrical signals. And again, these are just temporary knowledge or temporary wisdoms. And this will essentially block you from accessing your higher self, your true self, every time. it leaves you incredibly vulnerable, because being lost in this word world, you won't feel lost, but you are lost in this word world. It can trigger an emotional response. If the words that you have studied and understand to be true and real, and if you have, even if you have done, you know, meditations where you've seen things of your higher self, and had communications with yourself and so forth, you know, you try and copy across the concepts into word form. You find a lot of people, as I was saying, comparing the words that they use with other people's words, and it's inevitable, because each of us each of us has our own perspective on how we see the world and how we see our consciousness, and it's a very personal thing. So, you know, obviously no one can really say your perspective is wrong, because it's your perspective. But what we find is a war of words happening, and people battling their words with one another. There's in a lot of cases that's quite you know, quite well mannered, and the intent is the same. The intent is development, and challenging ourselves to learn, or challenging others to not be so rigid in their belief, and to explore, or trigger people to explore or research more and find out more information. But what can happen is, with these emotional responses to these words, is we can then leave ourselves vulnerable, and we can cracks can appear in our defense, and we can be attacked and manipulated by non-physical beings that kind of get their jollies from fucking with us in this way, actually. And this is a big part of what the war on consciousness is about. The consciousness that you have, that is you, is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful. It is so powerful that if the transhuman agenda had been completed, and your body was completely nanotechnologied into being absolutely controllable by unseen forces, such as you know, electrical emissions and frequencies of you know, EMF and so forth, as well as there's a great deal of manipulation, non-physical manipulation done. If our bodies were to be completely controlled, which is mind control, Google it if you don't know about mind control. You wouldn't find your way to a video like mine without having a good idea of that, I suppose. With this mind control, with this body control, with this control system, if the ultimate of that had been accomplished, and we had chips in our bodies, and you know, a switch could be pulled to say, you know, jump right now, and you responded to that. There's only one thing that is stronger than that, and that is your consciousness. Okay, so you would be able to completely override that entire electronic system using your consciousness, very, very simply. That's the extent of the powerfulness of your consciousness. So in a sense, it matters not. With the chemtrails, with the electricity, with the Wi-Fi, with the bad foods, because ultimately your power is in with your consciousness. Your consciousness is even stronger than the non-physical beings that are fucking with us in a big way. So the perspective that I have is your conscious exploration is the most important thing, the highest priority that there is for you to be exploring, for us to be exploring, and unlocking and taking sovereignty of. And anything else is secondary to this. Not saying other things aren't important, because they are, of course. But ultimately, this is where our power is. If you really want to do something about everything, then start and end in your consciousness. In fact, really, if you start exploring what reality is, you would find that your consciousness is the only truth that you can possibly find, and that's your reality, and that's your perspective. So the endless loop of words can be a trap, as I keep saying. By all means, learn what you need to learn. That they're all there to learn. But be very, very aware that the learning that you do in 3D is temporary and is only there to help you understand the reason that you need to let go of that. The reason that you need to let go of that you're learning. You're listening to me now, and I'm telling you that listening to me is what you need to be stopping doing. So do that. Alright, so hopefully more than half the people have now stopped listening to this video, and the other half are the ones that I need to be talking to. It's a trap. Okay? It's a very, very scary place to be. To be linking yourself with your egoic mind can be very, very dangerous. The egoic mind is very, very volatile and vulnerable. It can be affected by so many things. You know, if you drink an alcoholic beverage, yeah, that's going to affect different parts of your physical body, and one of those parts is your liver, and your liver can then start affecting your mind mood and start to manipulate some of your thoughts into different types of ways. Of course, alcohol is a pretty screwed up substance, actually. You know, it can change our behavior, and that's essentially what the idea is. So that gives you an idea on how weak our mind is, because it can be so easily influenced by just something that you eat or drink. Right? So why have so much importance on something so flimsy? Unfortunately, a lot of us, you know, myself included, I've I've just been through another test, or another exploration recently about this, and um, I speak from experience a lot of the time. Um, I can't remember where I was going with that. Yeah, I've been through recently something where I noticed that the egoic mind completely took over and took a life of its own. Um, or, yeah, kind of. And it started thinking things uh, that were quite dangerous for my being, and and I embraced this. Actually, I went along with it for a while, and I let it I let it do what it wanted, and what it ultimately wanted was to kill me, um, or kill my body in itself, which is kind of interesting, very interesting. It's, mm. Suicide's an amazing topic to really explore, and it's something that you really don't understand until you've been through it. Um, and I've been through it several times actually. It's quite cleansing. It's actually quite therapeutic. Ironically, you can learn a lot about yourself um, by being pushed or pushing yourself to that limit, to that edge. Um, a lot of times I've spoken about it being like a red line on a car where the RPM goes to the absolute maximum, and you realize that you've reached your peak, or you've reached your maximum tolerance of learning, and and to realize this is what your higher self wants to experience in your life experience. It's somewhat essential to be testing your limitations, because you can't learn if you stay within your limitations. Any athlete will understand what happens if you keep training and stopping when you start getting tired. You know, you've got to push through that, because the benefit doesn't happen until you've hit that line, and then you give it a little bit more of a nudge. You know, that's the part where you get the real benefit. So if you apply the same sort of technique with your mind, and you get to that point, and then you give it a bit of a nudge, you can really start figuring stuff out. Not that I condone suicide or trying to get there. I'm just saying, if you do go there, it can be very therapeutic if you explore it for what it is. Perhaps this video has made it to you from somebody that's seen that you're in a position like that, and perhaps feels that an understanding of perspective is required at this time. If that is the case, there's more I can teach you if you want to know. I won't really go into that stuff at the moment, but going back a little bit to the war on consciousness now, that was a bit of a tangent. So understanding that you are not your mind is really the key. And from there, from that perspective, you can take the power away from your egoic mind and leave your point of view, your perspective, in where your higher self's consciousness is, and then you can start living your life, operating your body through your higher self consciousness with deliberate intent. So your movements and your actions are something that you're watching as you're doing it, rather than them happening by instinct, which is what happens with the egoic mind. You don't seem to pay attention so much to the finer points. A really, really good example of this is walking. If you were to walk deliberately, right, you pay attention to, you look at the ground that you're walking on, and when your foot touches the ground, you can feel the pressure on the bottom of your foot, the sole of your foot, and you can also hear what the shoe sounds like as it's touching the ground, and you also sense the muscle flex and the electrical communications going from your brain to your muscles to make them spasm in a set sequence of events in order to maintain your balance. Then you notice that you need to be breathing at the same time. So you start breathing while you're doing this, and you notice your body's moving through space-time at that stage, and you can feel things on your skin like wind and other noises, external noises that you're not creating, you know, like cars or birds or something like that. And you realize that in that one step there were a trillion things for you to be paying attention to, and while you were doing that, you're not paying attention to your mind, and you have then deflated your egoic mind. How many of you find themselves walking or driving down the road and realizing that you're not really paying attention to what you're doing, and you don't realize that you've just passed the road that you needed to pass, or that you needed to turn down, or you might have walked past somebody that you knew but you didn't really notice them, or you might have walked past a beautiful tree, a plant, another creature, and completely ignored it because you were thinking about what you were going to do when you arrived at your destination from where you were walking to. It's missing the whole point of being alive. The whole point in being alive is experiencing what it feels like to walk deliberately, to live deliberately, with your consciousness connected to your body, feeling and experiencing the beauty that there is in existing. It's magnificent. It's magnificent. Oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. Now, the egoic mind is always going to be there. It's a response. It's just a part of your body. It's like a reflex. You know, if you get injured, if something hurts your hand, your arm will move away, and that's the instinct of that. Treat the egoic mind like that. Okay, it's like a response system to your environment. It's there to give you messages. You cannot kill it. People try and kill the ego and say, oh well, you know, I want my ego gone, and I just want to be my higher self. Well, that's not going to happen. Not as long as the body's alive, of course. After the body's dead, it's a different story. But until then, you need to understand that it's not you, that it is just a part of the body, and it's something that you are to pay attention to sometimes, to what it's trying to teach you and what it's trying to give you, because it gives you feedback from its interpretation itself of the five sense world that it has access to. That's what I meant earlier by your mind being very limited. It's only restricted to the five sense reality. So you know, and by all means pay attention to it, but don't give it the power to control your body. There's a very big difference there, eh? So it will come up with words, and it will put words in your mind, and the way to understand this is to read the words and then stop briefly and appreciate it for the message that it just gave you, and use that to understand what it is that's going on in your mind's perspective of your reality. And then you're able to continue with whatever it was you were doing, whether you're walking or what have you. Sometimes it might be telling you that you need to respond to something in your environment, which is not always true. You don't always need to respond to everything in your environment. Your environment is there to show you things, but it doesn't need to be making you do things. Only you can make you do things. There's not a lot else I want to talk about with this topic at this time. Be aware. Just be aware. Live deliberately. Move deliberately. Walk deliberately. Use the information that your mind seeks and that others share with you for the purpose of understanding why you need to let go of that information and just be yourself. And there you will find this infinite power that you have, and nothing else matters. Nothing else matters.